we live in an era where like everything is more predictable. Don't you feel like you and your friends are kind of doing the same things, reading the same things, listening to the same things? Like, don't you feel like you're being just the same as the person next to you? Like, how many of your beliefs are actually yours versus um, them being put there by machines? Kevin, the author, goes into this and he basically talks about how we are being told what deserves our attention.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that recommendation engines are shaping who people are and who they want to become, it's a species changing phenomenon, according to him. He
Mm-hmm.
says the future of the self is the future of recommendation. He goes on to provide a couple of examples. He says, take a look at YouTube. 70% of all time spent on the site is a result of recommended videos.
That's
30% of,
crazy.
right? 30% of Amazon page views come from recommendations. 80% of views on Netflix are from recommendations. And so with these recommendations, you think you're still in control because you're sitting there pressing play, but you're actually being coerced into these directions by these machines. And so think to yourself, how many times are machines overriding what you actually would find to be a great experience if it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like suggested with something else? If there was nothing to compare it with, would you actually choose what you're choosing?
Totally. Yeah, it reminds me of being a kid walking through we had like a VHS DVD movie rental place in our town center, and I mean, there were just rows and rows of movies, and we'd walk through there. My brother and I must have been 8 or 10 years old, and you just walk down the aisles and wait until something like caught your interest. You didn't
Exactly.
walk through the door and have someone put three movies in front of you and said, "Pick one of these three. They're trending number one in the world right now." It's like you just were able to kind of mosey around and let your attention wander and wait until something piqued your interest, and it led you to a much greater variety of content. And I think it is a really interesting point that he makes, that by becoming more predictable, which is what the algorithms want us to be, the more
Right.
predictable we are, the more they know us, the more they know what content we'll click on, the blander we become. Like, this isn't just like, okay, now my movies or my taste in movies is more boring. It's like I have less interesting things to add to the conversation when I meet new people or when I'm
Exactly.
talking with my friends, because we're all in our own echo chambers. And especially if we're like aligned, if we're all watching similar news, watching similar movies, listening to similar people, there's just much less room for new ideas and new ways of thinking to enter the conversation. I think, yeah, I mean, I think it really is incumbent on us at this point to willfully seek out new content, be it on Netflix, be it on Facebook, be it on Twitter, be it on YouTube. Like 70% of the videos on YouTube are driven by recommendations. Maybe next time you go on YouTube, go into it with some intentionality and think about like, what would I want to learn about? Not like but YouTube's going to give me 20 videos and let me pick one of them, and fall into that recommendation hole all over again. It's really hard thing to do, but I think it can help us preserve our inner curiosity and our inner spontaneity as humans.
It's wild to think about how the algorithms are just arranging us. Like they're arranging us in clusters, they're arranging us in groups. As you said, like if we're just surrounded with people that watch the same shows, like we're just simply being arranged. And there's
Mm-hmm.
actually people in Silicon Valley that have a job. There's a role that exists called choice architecture. And like this is not breaking news, but it's important because I want to bring it up because of the potential of the usage against us, right? So if you have a choice architecture working at a company and they have the power to change your preference, like that should make you feel uncomfortable.
Totally. Absolutely.
Are you fucking kidding
Absolutely.
me?
Absolutely. And there again, the profit motive here is we want our customers to be as predictable as possible. Like the object here isn't let's make our users as informed as possible. Let's make our users as free thinking as possible. Let's make our users like as charitable to their fellow Americans as possible. Like it's the exact opposite. And that's the way that it's worked out. So he talks about how, like, he doesn't want to act as though big tech got us here intentionally,
Right.
but I would say that the way it turned out, the way that big tech, is able to have made the type of money they made is by pushing us deeper into our corners. And now that we know that that's the way the incentives are aligned, we have to be hyper skeptical of big tech's business model. It's not to say that they built this intentionally, but that's the structure in place right now. And that's the system we're feeding every time we go on these apps and these websites. And unfortunately, we need them because they're like our critical information infrastructure right now. We need them to stay informed or pseudo informed, but it's just
Yeah.
important to know that the goal here isn't actually, again, creating like free thinking, loving, open-minded users. It's the exact opposite. And I feel like even, yeah, I mean, I like look at some of the rabbit holes I've fallen down over the last 5 years since this whole recommendation engine thing has really spun up. And I look back on some of the things I thought about even a couple years ago. I'm like, I don't agree with that. Like I just had that idea hammered into me by watching the same, types of content, reinforcing it over and over and over again. And it feels good to break free of it when you actually do get a little distance and you're able to see that that was something that was shoved down your throat, not something that was actually additive to your life. But I'm sure there's still tons of things I believe now that I wouldn't believe if I had, information that disproved it put in front of me. But I just haven't encountered the counter argument yet, and that's probably largely a result of the algorithm working to hide that counter argument from me.
And to put some context in that, 80% of views on Netflix are from recommendations, and those recommendations saved them $1 billion last year. They simply kept your attention. And so, to your point, the incentive system is just simply flawed, or it could be corrected. Um, but yeah, there's also ways of just thinking about, okay, if I want to reduce this impact on me, then like just think about how much of yourself are you giving to these tools? How much of your personality are you giving away? He shares the idea that I think most people are familiar with, which is just giving yourself that hour every day where you drop your phone, do something that you genuinely want to do, whether it's exercise or spend time with your kids, whatever the case may be, but do whatever you need to do to get out of the web of invisible forces, as he says.